All right, so this was your first time with Maimonides. So I like to take a poll to see how you enjoyed or hated the text that I assigned. So if you love the text, if it was the best experience ever, you give me a 10. If you hated it, now you want to just drop the class, you give me a 1. Okay, so any 10s for Maimonides? You can put your hand in the screen, right? Any 10s, no 10s. Okay, I still see a bunch of people with no cameras. So Achunov, Singh, Shepherd, Islam, Amasan, Pelico, your cameras, please. We're waiting for you, the whole class. All right, I'm not gonna continue till I have all the cameras. Let's see. Okay, so Islam, yes, I see you have a second camera. Okay, Aslam. Okay.
I've tried. I don't know how to work my camera. It's not working.
Let me see if I can find. If I can find your camera. Okay, maybe you can stay after class. We can talk about it. Pelico, your camera is not working at the moment. Okay. All right, Achuna, where's your camera? Achuna, are you here? Singh, Dilpreet. Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah, what happened?
Your camera, please.
Oh yeah, I've been trying to turn it on, and like my computer's mad weird. Like it's not turning on.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I'll try to like figure it out by next class.
All right. Yes, please. Thank you. All right. Great. Okay. So let's go back to our poll. So any 10s for Maimonides? Clearly not. Okay. 9, 8, 7. Okay. Islam, Delmas, Goldberg. 6. Aradai. Okay. Argitis. 5. All right. A little more. 4. 3. Sing. 2. Oh, Jaramillo. 1. Okay, let's start with the haters. Jaramillo, what happened?
Personally, I feel like it was hard to understand.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I was
Normal.
like, yeah, so I was like, oh my God, like, what the fuck?
You're in college, Jaramillo. It's
Yes.
supposed to be hard. I'm not going to give you like, what is it called? I was seeing that today in Barnes and Nobles. This trilogy about vampires. What was it called? This famous, they made a movie out of it. Anyways, yeah, I'm not going to give you stuff like that to read, right? It's supposed to be hard.
Yeah, it was a little hard to understand.
Yes, it's normal, right? But again, right, all I'm inviting you to do, remember, is not to understand, right? I just want you to experience. So even if you don't understand anything, I want you to enjoy the experience of just being there with Maimonides, right? And it's okay not to understand everything. It's normal, right? These are very great minds, way beyond us.
And we also started from like the middle or something, right?
That's true. It doesn't help that it's a Braj version and it's in the middle. I agree with you. Yeah, I wouldn't like that either. Okay. Let's see. Somebody said they felt like Maimonides when he was writing the book at 9 or 10 p.m. at night. Like, Okay, good. Any other haters? I saw Singh. I think Singh had some issues. Would you like to share with us what happened?
I also thought it was really confusing, but there were some points that he was making that I just couldn't understand or kind of disagreed with like the whole situations with the animals and like how humans should kill if it's necessary for them. But I just don't agree with that and like his whole stance on that.
Yes, that's true. Animals for him, are just there to be used up, right? That's true. And nowadays, well, nowadays most of us still think that too. Except a few of us who, are trying to be vegan or vegetarian. Very good. Yes, absolutely. Okay, let's see. There were a few lovers. I saw I think Delmas, maybe Islam and Goldberg. You want to share why you love Maimonides so much?
if you guys don't mind, I'll go and share my thoughts. I feel like I liked the perspective of Maimonides in a way. Also, trying to put myself in his shoes, which is like really important, I think, because then you start to see like what factors or conditions or even things around him make him say the things he's saying. But I also didn't like the fact that he sided a little bit more about with Aristotle and his view on how God can set the world, because there's one extreme where God is in control of everything, even me speaking right now, and that's his decree. But at the same time, there's another extreme, which is Aristotle's, in which I felt like it was pointing towards to, which is like God just sets the world and it's only you who have full control. So I kind of found myself in the middle where it's like God has a decree for things, but at the same time, I have been given the opportunity for free will and blessing, but it's just me.
Good. Actually, you'll be happy to find out today that Maimonides thinks exactly like you. So he's actually in the middle ground also, you'll see. So kindred spirit. Al-Hadai, did you want to add?
Yes, so I actually like this book more than Job. Because it was from the middle, so I was trying to connect it to like before when you said that he's trying to find ways to like get you out of suffering, which actually makes sense, like the stuff that you think that if you're ignorant, you're gonna be stuck. If you have wisdom and like not like the animals. Animals are like they don't have like wisdom and stuff, so they stuck where they are. But if you do, like humans, they have free will, so they can escape it. And when he connected it with Job, because like Job had no connection with God first. He thought of God as like a small thing that just gives him the like wealth and power. But then after when he talked to God and he found the connection, then he escaped suffering. And that's why I like this book more than Job.
Okay, great. You actually summarized the whole topic of the class today. You can just go. Very good, very good. Delmas.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what our colleague just said, because one of the things that he made me think about was like, does God really govern every single little details about my life? It's just how he raises some very interesting questions. And like, is it always the case that the more pious you are, right, the more God's providence will be in your life? Because that would just go at odds with what we learned with Job, because he was a very pious man, but yet God was just kind of like doing something completely different in his life that seems very contradictory to what we would think of God being nice or kind.
Yes, very good. And you mentioned something interesting. You will see with Maimonides that if you're pious, it's not enough, right? Like Al-Hadai said, you need also a little bit of intelligence. So we're going to see that for Maimonides, not enough to just be like Job, right? Religious. It's not going to get you anywhere, in fact. So we'll see that today. Okay, let's get in the text. I'm going to summarize. I'm going to summarize where we're going the next couple of days, and then we'll get into the text into more details. So first of all, we're going to see, just to go back to our issue of problem of evil, right, suffering. We're going to see that for Maimonides, he starts out with Aristotle, right? So who was it? Was it Islam? Yeah, it was you, right? Who said that he's, where are you?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, that's you. Okay, yes. Okay, so it's just trying to remember you guys. Okay, so he starts out with Aristotle, but we're going to see that he moves away. But he begins like Aristotle. We're going to see that for him, God is not the cause of suffering. Aristotle agrees, right? God is not the one bringing suffering to us, like Job thought, right? In fact, suffering, there's two causes. Number one, accidents, which, some tree falls and you happen to be there and you die, right? Number two, our behavior, right? We can also bring our own suffering. Actually, if you look at 80 or actually 99% of your suffering, look no further than yourself, right? Or other human beings, right? 99% of the suffering in this world is brought on by human beings, either to themselves or upon others, right? Most of our suffering that we go through has to do with some mistake that somebody is making or that we are making, right? So he's basically saying that we are responsible for our own suffering, right? Suffering is not God bringing it on, right? Suffering, and you know, we, when I say we, I mean collectively. So for example, you know, you die of lung cancer, but you never smoked a cigarette, so it's not your fault technically, but you live in an area which is polluted because of other people's mistakes, right? The way that people are, you know, exploiting the land, there's no regulations, and so here you are breathing in toxic air like we are every day here in New York, although it's not so bad, the air here compared to other cities, right? And you die, right? Not your fault, but human, right? Human greed, human stupidity, right, has brought this upon you, right? So that's the first part where he agrees with Aristotle. But then he says, in the midst of our suffering, right, there is still a way out, right? Human beings are special. They're different from animals who are stuck there, right? We can actually exit the situations of suffering that we find ourselves in, right? There is a way out for us. And that's what he means by divine providence, right? There is a way out for human beings. And we're going to see that this way out is possible through this faculty that we were given, which is called reason. Okay, I'm really summarizing the whole text briefly. Okay, through reason, we can rise above our suffering. We're going to see, right? This is our passport. Our intelligence is our passport out of our suffering, right? And in that sense, right, he's moving away from Aristotle, right? Now, of course, why reason? Anybody know why reason is such an important dimension? What is it with our reason that is going to allow us to escape our suffering? Does anybody know? Anybody figured out what he means by reason? What is the purpose of reason? Ahmad, go ahead.
I think reason could be used synonymously with reflection and self-awareness. So if you reflect on how my actions brought about a type of suffering, then you can kind of avoid that in the future and adjust yourself accordingly.
How do you know so much, right? How is it that our reason is so enlightened? What makes this possible, that we human beings know the way out of our own mess? How does Maimonides understand reason? Is it something just that we do on our own, or is it something else? I'm wondering. Let's see. I think Islam was saying something here. Can we direct the compass of our own ship? Not for Maimonides, right? Reason is not something that we come up with, right? This is not us coming up with solutions. Reason has another purpose in Maimonides than just this kind of machine that comes up with solutions. Anybody figure it out? What is the true role of reason? It's not just something, you know, churning and coming up with solutions. It's something much profound, much more profound than that. Ahmad, did you figure it out?
So it's emanating from divine origin. It's godlike.
Very good, right? Our reason is our gateway into the divine, right? In other words, our reason is the bridge between us and divine wisdom, divine love, divine power, divine inspiration, right? That's what it is. Reason for Maimonides is a vessel, right? It's not what we see as reason, which is this kind of computer, right? Which is generating solutions, right? Reason is a vessel, or it's a gateway, or it's a bridge, right, between us and the divine. And so through our reason, the divine can begin to pour itself in us and offer us, right, guidance, intelligence, clarity, illumination as to what to do next, you see? So that's very important. Make sure you write down that for Maimonides, reason is not just a computer generating answers to your problems. It's a vessel or a bridge or a gateway to the divine intelligence. Or like Ahmad said more precisely, it's an emanation of the divine intelligence, therefore connection, right? Okay, so we'll talk about this. Now, of course, the issue, this is the main problem. Again, I'm going very fast over everything, right? Most of us, we have this vessel, but our vessel is so polluted, it is not able to contain the divine light. And this is the problem, right? Often our reason is either too small or too cluttered? Write this down. 2 problems with reason. I'm going to put it in the chat, right? Because we'll talk about both of these, right? Our reason, right, is either too small or too cluttered. And so it cannot properly receive the divine light, right? Either it's too cluttered with prejudices or narrow-mindedness or, small way of thinking, or either it's too small, right, in that sense, or it's too cluttered with prejudices and so forth. And so we'll see that for Maimonides, we need to learn to purify this vessel in order to really reach or gain this divine light that will pull us out of our suffering. And so today we're going to look at how to expand our reason, and next time we'll look at how to purify our reason. Okay, so that's the summary. Okay, Islam, you have a question?
I kind of do. I just want to ask if we could possibly, or if Maimonides would agree, if we were to, the apparatus in which we can connect to the divine source, could that be the heart instead of the mind? And purifying the heart might be a way for us to connect, or for us creation to connect to the creator.
So you are already saying what Rumi is going to say, right? Rumi is going to actually say it's not the mind, it's the heart, and we have to purify the heart. And so everything that you're saying, he's actually going to talk about. But for Maimonides, the heart, unreliable. It's reason that really is the gateway. But you'll see that Rumi will actually go against Maimonides and agree with you. No, reason doesn't work. What matters is the heart. So there's 2 gateways, right? In both, by the way, Judaism also talks about the heart, right? There are some philosophers who align themselves with Rumi. I think, for example, Al-Ghazali, right? This is one of, no, sorry, that's a Muslim. Judah Halevi, sorry, which, like Al-Ghazali, right? These are all the philosophers of the heart. And then you have the philosophers of the mind, like Averroes, Maimonides, right? So you actually have these 2 groups, right? These 2 factions. First one says, no, God is accessed through reason. And the second one say, no, that's bullshit. Sorry, I don't know how to say it. It's actually accessed through the heart, right? So there's this war. But for Maimonides, it's reason, right? Okay, now let's get into the text. Now that you have an overview, let's go into the details. Page 166. I'm going to start on 166. I'm in the second paragraph, I believe. Who is there? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. So we begin here, right? With back to the beginning. Divine providence, by which he means the divine wisdom, divine light, divine comfort, right? All of these gifts of the divine. Notice these are not material gifts like Job, right? Don't read divine providence as cattle, camels, family members, right? Like we saw with Job. This divine providence in the context of Maimonides is intellectual illumination. It's a solution that comes to the mind. Right? Guidance. Thank you, Islam. Guidance, wisdom, comfort sometimes, right? Love, light. This is what he means by divine providence. Okay, so make sure you write this down, right? Divine providence is not material here like in Job, right? It is intellectual. It is the wisdom, right? Guidance, light, clarity. That's what he means by divine providence, okay? Now, so he says this, right? I believe that divine providence extends in this lower sublunar world. This is us under the moon, lunar, right? Sublunar means under the moon. He's quoting Aristotle here. This is Aristotelian language. Divine providence extends only and alone to human individuals, right? The human species is the only one in which all conditions of individuals, blah, 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 etc. Okay, so only to human beings. So this is, right? This is where he disagrees with Aristotle, right? Aristotle says, we're stuck in nature. Whatever happens in nature will happen to us. We have, right, whatever we do, whatever human beings do, we are stuck in this natural world, right? Whatever happens in the natural world, we undergo, right? Aristotle is saying, no, there is an exit. any human being can escape their situation of suffering, right? Suppose you're born in a very painful family, everything is going wrong, everybody has addictions, I don't know, there's history of abuse, right? According to Aristotle, you're stuck, right? Necessarily, you do not have a way out because this is how you were raised. This is all you've seen. So you're just going to perpetuate, right? Naturally, what you've seen and experienced, right? So Maimonides is saying, no, because we have this vessel and this gateway, we can receive wisdom, that the wisdom that we cannot find in our social or cultural or right, economic context, right? There is a way out. We can rise above the suffering, right? So whereas Aristotle would say, if you were born from a drunk parent, you will be drunk, right? If you were born in domestic violence, you will be violent. And it's true, genetically, this is Aristotle, he's a scientist. Genetically, we are wired to repeat, right, what has happened or what we've witnessed, how we've been raised, right? We are all in a way stuck in a cycle of suffering. Naturally, this is how things should be. You just repeat what you've seen and learned in your environment and you perpetuate the suffering. Yes, your mother or your father or your mother was a cheater, your grandparents were cheaters, now you're gonna be a cheater, right? Or there was a history of violence, now you're gonna be like that too. Or of addiction, like, so naturally, you should perpetuate the suffering. But Maimonides is saying, no, there is an exit because we have this connection, right? Okay, so, actually, there's a beautiful story in the Talmud, which we talked about, right? The Talmud, remember, is the commentaries of the rabbis. So in the story, you have a beautiful, they just tell this story. It's not in the biblical text, but they kind of imagine the story of Abraham. If you recall, Abraham was the first believer, right? And if you remember the story of Abraham, he had no children. His wife was not capable of conceiving a child. He was, childless for decades, right? But God had promised Abraham, you will have a child. And Abraham, he waits a few years, 10 years, 20 years, still no child. So Abraham has a moment of weakness. This is how the rabbis tell the story. Has a moment of weakness. He goes to see a psychic, literally an astrologer. And he goes to the psychic, and the psychic looks at the chart, his chart, right? His astrological chart, and says, well, I'm sorry, but according to your chart, you're not meant to have children, right? The stars have decreed that you're actually not meant to have children. And so, Abraham goes back to God, and then on one of their walks together, he says, I went to see an astrologer, and she said, I'm not meant to have, right? The stars have determined that I should have no child. And God looks at him and answers, I am above the stars, right? So this is the idea, right? God, in a way, whatever nature has dictated for you, whatever your social context has dictated for you, or economic or racial or religious context, right? God is above the stars, right? So in other words, there's a way out, right? We are never determined. That's what it means, right? That's what Maimonides is saying. We are never determined. There is always an exit, right? Okay, now you have to figure out how this exit works. Now, unlike most religious people, Maimonides is not going to say that the exit is God appearing in your life and saving you, right? No, right? Many of us, we're sitting here at home praying, God, help me, right? Get me out of here, right? Make my husband nice to me. Make my child respectful. Help me with this exam. Here we're praying for God to intervene. Maimonides is this is not how it works, right? For Maimonides, not how it works. God is not going to come. We say ex cathedra, right? He's not, or ex machina. This is Latin. Not going to just come and intervene and solve all your problems, right? God comes through your intellect, right? And so this is what we need to care for, right? Ex cathedra. Thank you, Betulin. I was losing my Latin. Okay, very good. The little Latin that I have. All right, excellent. So God is not going to just intervene in your life, right? I know a lot of us believe that, right? That God will do a miracle or something. No miracles from Maimonides. Remember, he's a rationalist. He's an Aristotelian. He's not going to go around telling you pray and God will answer you. So because he's a rationalist, he says, no, God will respond. He will, in a way, enter your mind. And then you will find your own way out through this divine inspiration. So he really thinks that we find our way out of suffering by receiving the divine guidance. So it's a kind of, there's an effort. You have to do something. You have to receive the divine wisdom, and then you have to act upon it. It's not enough to just sit there and wait for God to fix your problems. Okay, there's a couple hands. So Jaramillo and then Islam.
Oh, it makes more sense now. So that's why he brought up the job thingy.
So we're getting there. We're getting to Job.
No, makes now it was making more sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And now you
Right.
see what he's doing, right? I'm giving you the architecture. Very good. I'm glad you're seeing more now,
Thank you.
Jaramillo. I'm happy. Okay. Islam, what did you want to say?
Really quickly, I agree. Like, I think God gave us a right, and I'm a psych major, so I have to learn about this, but we have a right and left hemisphere, so he gave us reason and like imagination or that type of, belief as well. But if he just wanted me to believe, he wouldn't give me a left hemisphere to reason and logically deduct that there is evidence for a creator. Give me both. So you kind of have to you have to play with the whole thing to start to understand and see more. And I was really happy when Jonathan said I see more, because it really opened my mind to that, what you were saying. That,
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're talking here about a Jewish philosopher, but in Islam, you have the same idea. We were given a mind. You have to tell me where this idea is, but from what I have heard is that there is this belief in Islam that if we were given a mind, we are allowed to use it, right?
you have to question. Like, I think God wants us to question.
Exactly.
Like, everything.
If you can find me a reference for what you just said, I would really appreciate it.
All right, I'll try to see.
Thank you. Great. All right. So here, let's see. There's another. Al-Haddai, go ahead.
So just a question. Since like the stuff that I don't know how to live on mind. I'll just ask you later. I was just gonna say, doesn't that undo prayer in a way? It's like people pray for God to give them things.
So
right?
Yes, it changes the way you pray, right? Instead of praying for God to intervene, you pray for wisdom to know what to do in that particular situation. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're married to a terrible man. Okay, let's imagine, God forbid, that you're married to a terrible man. So you can pray, God, please change my husband. Or you can pray, God, give me the wisdom to know how to act with this man so that our relationship can get better. You see the difference? You're praying both ways, right? Prayer is different. Make sense, Al-Haddai?
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly, right? So, but most of us, we sit there like idiots and we're praying, God, change the situation. It's not going to work, right? Sometimes God has a whim and he makes a miracle, right? But most of the time, it's really what we should be praying for is the guidance and the love and the strength and the courage to know what to do in the situation so we can transform the situation, right? So we can become vessels for the divine wisdom, right? Okay, so continuing, then I'll get a few more questions, right? So then reason, so it goes through the reason. And of course the key, right? So let's read this, right? He says this here on page, where is it? Why didn't I write down the pages? Hold on. Where does he say this? It's in proportion to our reason, blah, blah, blah. Here it is. Page 169, go to the third paragraph. Tell me when you're there. Put your hand in the screen. Okay. So here he's saying, right? I'm going to skip 5 lines down from the third paragraph, right? This is because providence is exercised by a rational being, right? So in other words, providence is accessible to a rational being only. Providence, remember, light, guidance, not camels and oxen, right? Namely, the one who is reason so perfect that no greater perfection is thinkable. Now here's the line you underline. Therefore, providence extends to everyone who is affected by this emanation to the extent, this is key, that the being is gifted with reason. In other words, the more reason you have, the better equipped your reason is, the more divine providence you will have, right? The less equipped your reason is, the more depleted your reason is, the less access you have to divine providence. So let me talk a little bit about this, because this is a very important point where Maimonides is really leaving the beaten path, right? Most religions, right, they believe if you love God and you pray to God and you keep the commandments and you do the rituals, God is going to help you, right? This was what Job believed. I'm going to do the sacrifices and, pray and God will help me. Maimonides is saying, no, because if you do all these things, but you have the mind of an idiot, you don't have there is no way God can pour his wisdom into you. So you'll be blindly following the laws and the rituals, but you will never get out of your mess. And I'm sure you've met people like this who are very religious. They pray all day and their life is just a mess, right? They have nothing. So what Maimonides is saying, it's not enough to be religious. In fact, he's going to go as far as to say, if you're religious without reason, you can fall into the sin of idolatry. Okay, so let's stop on that a little bit. Why does he say that? Why does he say that a religious, pious person who has no reason, who doesn't cultivate their reason, can easily fall into the sin of idolatry? What does he mean by that? First of all, maybe we have to define idolatry. I don't know if we did this in the class. What is idolatry? Can someone tell me? Islam, you want to answer that question?
Worshipping something or giving an attribute of God to something else, or basically worshiping another idol or statue that's other than God.
Okay, very good, right? The idolatry is directly connected to the making of a representation of God. So you make a statue or you make an image, and then you take that as God, right? Now, what happens when you make an image? What's the big deal? Why can't I make an image of God? It would be nice to have an image of God sitting here on my wall to look at me, right? I'll carry in my pocket, I can look at it when I feel, cranky. What's wrong with making an image? What is the problem with just the making of the image or the idol? What's going on? What's the big sin here? Islam, you want to try again?
I'm going to try again. I think it's because, just like Maimonides also quoted in the book, I'm not sure which page, but it is in the homework assignment reading pages in between. He said that the human being is insufficient to comprehend, perhaps insufficient to comprehend God. So any ascribing of anything that we can imagine is not attributable to God in God's eyes. But that's just, yeah.
Very good, right? A representation is a small version of God, a narrow perception of God. It's a small God, right? As soon as you make a representation, you're making God small. This is the problem. Now, if your mind can also create idols, right? Not just your hands, right? How does the mind create idols? By making small concepts of God, small vision of God, small representation of God, narrow. God is this and this and this. He's not that. What have you just done? An idol, right? Anyone walking around saying, this is what God wants, this is what he doesn't want, you're a sinner, right? God will send you to hell. You are a victim right now of idolatry. You're making God into what you think God is. Anytime you reduce God to who you think he is, you are sinning the sin of idolatry, right? So when your mind is small, what kind of representation of God will you have?
If I pray, God will give me a lot of money.
Exactly, right? When your mind is small, sorry, Karuchi, answer the question and then ask your question. When your mind is small, what kind of God are you going to have?
I was going to say you run the risk of just making God into what you need at that moment. And if it's coming from those negative emotions or places in you where you're suffering, then you're going to apply whatever pacifies that at the moment.
Okay, very good, right? When your mind is small, you have a small view of God, and therefore you are sinning the sin of idolatry, right? But when your mind is vast, then you have a big, broad vision of God. And at that point, you are escaping, right? Somebody who is only religious, but has a mind which is narrow, rigid, is small, constricted, right? cannot receive anything from God, right? At that moment, they're just going to continue to plow through the cycle of suffering, right? Again, Islam, it's not the heart, it's the mind here. This is not yet Rumi, right? So yes, right? So this is the problem. This is why for Maimonides, not only if you're just religious, but you haven't cultivated your mind, there were two things will happen to you. Number one, you're sinning idolatry all day long, because your mind, because it's small, is giving you a small vision of God and what he wants for you. And so you're imagining small things for yourself, small rules, small principles, narrow spaces. God wants me here. I can't go here. I can't do that. Remember Job? Job, right? He was stuck in this kind of perfectionism. I have to be perfect. I cannot sin. And God kind of like explodes that. He's like, live, please, and leave, exit, breathe, right? Remember, that was the whole purpose of God's speech, right? Was to kind of explode the narrow space that Job had built around himself, right? So first thing that will happen, if you're a believer, no matter how authentic you are, if your mind is small, you will have a small view of who God is and what God wants you to do or be, right? And you'll be stuck in this very narrow space. Second thing that will happen, you won't be able to receive much guidance and light. And so you will repeat the cycle of suffering. Okay, everybody got this? Let me repeat. Two things will happen, right? If you are, no matter how virtuous you are, no matter how pious, no matter how much you love God, right? If your mind remains uncultivated, if you're not cultivating your reason, two things will happen. Number one, I'll put it in the chat, right? Number one, you'll have a narrow concept of God, not only of God, but of what he wants from you, right? And many of us, we live very narrow lives because we think this is what God wants, and we don't feel like we can go any further or out, right? And we, in a way, live very small, constricted lives because of our small, constricted view of God, right? So that's the first thing, which is, by the way, idolatry, right? And number two, there's not enough space, right, for divine providence, which, remember, means wisdom, light, clarity, to enter, right? So you will continue to perpetuate the cycle of suffering, right, that you've been born into. Okay, that's the problem. That's why for Maimonides, not enough to be religious, right? In fact, for Maimonides, you don't even have to be religious. If your mind is in the right place, automatically divine providence will pour itself into you. So this is even more crazy, right? What Maimonides is really saying is that if your mind is good, the flow of divine providence will naturally come to you. Whether you believe in God or not, you will have clarity as to how to live your mind. So he flips it. Not only is being religious problematic, but he seems to be saying, in fact, you don't even have to be religious. If your mind is in the right place, the divine providence, like water, right, which is always looking for crevices and cracks to pour into, will see your big wide opening and pour itself into you, right? That's the idea here. So you can go as far as to say that Maimonides is implying that you don't even need to have any type of belief in God. If your mind is cultivated, automatically divine providence and divine light is going to pour into you. Okay, let's get a few questions. Karuchi, go ahead.
No, I didn't have a question. I wanted to share what I said before. But I definitely agree though, after you framing it that way, that this is something very interesting. I didn't catch all of this at first when I read this. I was thinking very superficial, very, very analytical. Thank you.
Yeah, it's easy to miss what he's really saying because he seems very dull and boring and scholarly, but actually it's amazing. It's crazy what he's saying, right? If you know the religious setting that he's philosophizing in, it's really progressive out there, right? Okay, so let's continue, right? So, of course, two things will need to happen, right? So now we know we need to cultivate our mind, right? Not enough to have a mind. The mind needs two things. It needs to be uncluttered and it needs to be broad. Okay, so these are the two things that the mind needs. Okay. Okay, so number one, the mind needs to be empty, right? No clutter, by which he means no prejudices and preconceptions. And we'll talk about this next time, right? And number two, the mind needs to be broadened, widened, not remain rigid, right? Narrow, right? Narrow-mindedness will bring you far away from God, according to Maimonides, right? So this is what we're going to be talking about next time. When we talk about the purification of the mind, we'll talk about how to broaden the mind, how to purify the mind, how to declutter the mind, right? Because again, it's not enough to have a mind if you're not going to use it. If it's going to be full of clutter and very small, how is divine providence going to flow? It's impossible, right? So that we will do next time. But now let's skip over to Job, because Maimonides concludes with this commentary on Job. So let's see a little bit what he says. This is on page 172, I believe. And he's going to go now a step deeper, right? So we know we need the mind to get out of suffering because we will get some guidance, inspiration. But then Maimonides actually takes a leap. And he says, actually, ultimately, the solution to suffering lies in what Job finally discovered. So did anybody make out what was it that Job finally understood, according to Maimonides, which in a way elevated him above all of his sufferings forever? Anybody know? I think Al-Haddai was already going in that direction, but does anybody want to try and tell me what did Job discover? Okay, Al-Haddai, go ahead.
Well, he got a connection with God. Back then, he just thought of God as like the thing that gives him money and power.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. I'll come back to that. Karuchi, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that what he had mentioned is that his real happiness came in knowing God, and when you read that, it means on a personal level, not just on an informational level.
Excellent, right?
Not knowing of God, but knowing God.
Yes, yes, you guys are getting it. In other words, far than being, it's not just about receiving guidance, right? For Maimonides, in this passage, simply knowing God, in other words, simply the experience of the divine presence is enough to elevate you above all suffering. So we talked about God as a way out, right? We talked about divine light, clarity, understanding in order to kind of try to find a way out. Maimonides is going to go even further. He's going to say just the experience of the divine presence, of this connection, is enough to, in a way, anesthetize or elevate you above any type of suffering you're going through. So even if you never make it out, basically, that's what he's saying. Even if you are really stuck in this cycle, even if there is, no matter how intelligent you are, you, in a way, choose to stay there, right? You can still rise above whatever suffering you're in. Because it's true, there are situations in life where no matter how enlightened we are, we have to go through these situations, right? True, many situations we ought to, move out and try to evolve, but there are such situations of suffering where we are really stuck there, right? Imagine a bad marriage, right? Where you have kids involved and they're young and you choose to stay, right? For the sake of the children. Or imagine someone dies, right? You don't have control. It's not no matter how enlightened you are, you cannot stop that person from dying, right? So there are painful situations which we cannot escape. At that moment, says Maimonides, ultimately, that's why he says this, ultimately what matters is the connection. Because if I have that connection, I have an anchor, right? No matter what's going on around me, I'm strong, right? I'm centered. I'm rooted. I have this anchor. I have this connection, which is helping me stay put, right? Stay peaceful, right? Serene in the midst of the chaos, right? So you see how he progresses, right? From God as being kind of helping us, solve our problems, but sometimes problems cannot be solved. What then? The connection itself, according to Maimonides, is enough. Just feeling the divine presence and the divine comfort in the middle of the suffering, even if nothing changes, is enough to help us surpass it, transcend it, right? So let's go to the passage. This is what he says here, 172. Go to the 3 little stars. Are you there with the 3 little stars on 172? And then Carucci, I'll get you. So he says this, right? Commenting on Job. This is why this opinion is attributed to Job. However, he only said these things, so all the insults that he hurled at God, right? He's talking about that here. As long as he was not in possession of true knowledge, but knew God by hearsay, right? As most adherents of revealed religions do. But as soon as he obtained knowledge of God, he realized that true happiness, and underlying this, which consists in knowing God. That's it. You know God, you are in the divine presence, you will be happy no matter what, right? Being in the embrace of God is enough to shelter you from whatever is going on. You will remain joyful in the midst of the most excruciating pain. It is possible, according to Maimonides, to remain joyful at the heart of the storm, at the heart of the most excruciating pain, right? Because you are in the embrace of God, right? You are in the knowledge of God. And he says this true happiness is in store for all those who know him, and none of all these afflictions can dull it, right? So that's ultimately the true happiness, the true way out of suffering. Not even to find a solution. Just dwelling in the presence of God is ultimately, even if you cannot escape the suffering, you can transcend it, right? Let me write this down, right? Even if you cannot escape it, right? Even if you cannot escape the suffering, you can rise above it by dwelling in the presence of God, right? That's the idea. So you see how Maimonides starts out very rational, right? Yes, reason, right? We can solve our own problems. And in the end, he finishes in the embrace of God. Do you see how Maimonides is a kind of a closeted mystic? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Put your hand in the screen if you're seeing what I'm saying, right? He starts out all rational, trying to be rigorous, Aristotle. And in the end, we have this beautiful depiction, this mystical union, right? Between the believer and God. This is not rational anymore, right? So this is what I mean when I say that Maimonides is a kind of a poet, a hidden poet, right? He's trying to be rational, but in the end, he ends up in the embrace of God. This is poetry, right? We are not anymore with the Aristotelian rationalists. So Maimonides is a kind of a closeted poet or closeted mystic, right? He's trying so hard to be rational, but he has these moments, right, where he kind of just goes, like I said, bursts into song, right? So that's the beauty of Maimonides for me. That's why for me, he's not just a philosopher, he's also a mystic, right? He has these moments and then goes back, right? Arguments, rigor, Aristotle. Okay, great. All right. Good. So I said everything I had to say. Carucci, I saw your hand for a while. Did you want to say something?
No, I forgot to put it down again. Sorry.
All right. So next time, I want you to read the passage and I want you to look at how we purify the mind, right? This is 155 especially, right? That's what we'll be looking at. Let me make sure, actually. I feel like I'm giving you the wrong page. I am. 153? I don't know what the page, whatever I said in the syllabus.
It says page 55 to 63.
I knew there was a 5 in there. Okay, 55. Page 55? Here it is. I see it now. Yes, I'll be focusing especially on page 57, where he really talks about how do we purify the mind. So that's what we're missing, right? Now we know that we can rise above our suffering. We know that we can transcend our suffering, but for this, we need a healthy mind. And that's what we'll be doing next time. Okay, guys, we're done right on time for once. You can go, and if you want to stay behind with some questions, you can. I'll stop the recording.